By now, many of you have heard or seen my opinions on the latter Metallica albums, Saint Anger and Death Magnetic. For some of you, this might actually be the reason why you're a subscriber of mine, and meanwhile for others, it might be a reason why you're not, or why you dislike my opinion or just hate me. Well, for whatever reason, whatever it may be, well, there's one thing that I've never really gotten from a lot of you guys, and it's something that's always kind of struck me as a little odd. I've never had any of you guys actually ask me what I thought about any other Metallica album. It seemed like it was just these two albums that you guys were primarily interested in, mainly because, of course, Saint Anger has been so profoundly notorious for its suckitude that a lot of people wanted to see me do it in my traditional angry style. And Death Magnetic was kind of one of those albums where, you could definitely make a logical argument for both sides. But, well, a lot of you guys never really wondered what I thought about either the 90's era or the 80's era, the classic stuff. Maybe it's because I just couldn't really do it in an angry style. Maybe that's really what you guys love about me. But at any rate, I think it's time that I actually do a little bit of trip-taking back to the past once again, and go back to the 1980s where Metallica was Alcoholica and was just getting their start. Welcome to Coverkiller Nation's review of the 1980s era Metallica albums. Now, Metallica was kind of a noble idea whenever it was first incepted upon back in the early 1980s. It was just Lars Ulrich looking for a couple of guys to play music with. Of course, Ulrich was able to quickly find James Hetfield, who then quickly found Ron McGovey and Dave Mustaine to create the original lineup for Metallica. And this was something that was really unique, because this is something that even to this day, whenever I quiz people, a lot of people don't know. That's right, the Big Four did not originally include Clifford Burton, nor did it originally include Kirk Hammett. Instead, it was McGovey and Dave Mustaine that actually had those two spots. So, you learned something today, and knowing is half the battle. During a series of events that could be seen as potentially godly for all of you thrash metal fans, Dave Mustaine was kicked out of the band basically for being an alcoholic asshole, which, well, that's Dave for you, and was replaced by Kirk Hammett. James Hetfield was moved to the singing position as well as the rhythm guitar player, considering Dave Mustaine was the singer of the band at the time. And before all of this had even occurred, Ron McGovey was replaced by Cliff Burton. McGovey's stint in the band was extremely short and hardly worth noticing, so if you never were able to remember the name Ron McGovey, you're not missing much. Now, if you're wondering where Kirk Hammett and Cliff Burton originally came from, well, Kirk Hammett actually had a stint in Exodus, and Cliff Burton came from a band called Trauma. Well, with this lineup set, and with some songs that they had already put together, including some that had Dave Mustaine's credits on it, the band was able to go into the studio and produce Kill 'Em All, which was their first record. And this was actually what a lot of people consider to be the very first thrash album. And I'm here to tell you that that's not necessarily 100% correct. Overkill had actually done thrash a little bit earlier than Metallica had. However, this was the first of the Bay Area thrasher albums, which really brought a lot of mainstream attention to the thrash metal genre and to the San Francisco area. Now, Kill 'Em All is considered to be a legendary release, kind of like what Rain and Blood did for Slayer. It's what Kill 'Em All did for Metallica. It really launchpadded them to what you could consider to be some immediate success. They did a lot of extensive touring for this album around the local area. They were able to give out vinyl records of it and cassettes and the like, do a lot of tape trading, and just really promote the shit out of it. They were able to form a very close bond with a lot of the other bands that were right around that area. Now, of course, tensions would be a little bit strained between them and Megadeth, but that's sort of to be expected. Now, a couple years after that, Ride the Lightning was released. But one thing that I will say first is that Kill 'Em All had a couple things that a lot of traditional Metallica albums never did have. Yes, there is an instrumental on it, and, well, instrumentals aren't exactly something that were uncommon on Metallica records. However, the instrumental on Kill 'Em All was actually just a bass solo that Cliff Burton had come up with called Anesthesia, Pulling Teeth. And this is kind of strange why something that was just sort of a solo, something that was just an idea but not so much a full song, actually made it to the record. I mean, it's a very cool little idea, and it definitely showcased Cliff Burton's talents a good bit. However, it just seems a little bit out of place. But it's a really nifty little thing if you're not one to really look for continuity. This album also contains some of the stalwarts and the mainstays in their live set. Songs like The Four Horsemen, Seek and Destroy, Metal Militia, you'll sometimes hear get dished out every so often. Really good stuff. Hit the Lights is another one that really comes to mind. Now, unfortunately because of this, the Four Horsemen was originally credited somewhat to Dave Mustaine, and eventually became the Mechanics on Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good, which is the first Megadeth album. There's a little bit of a bitter dispute about that, however, there's a little bit of a difference between the songs. The original Mechanics is very, very short. It's a whole hot mess. Four Horsemen, I have to say, definitely beats the shit out of Mechanics by a long shot. But as I was getting to, a couple years passed and they were able to release their second album entitled Ride the Lightning. Now, Ride the Lightning is one of these albums where a lot of people sort of either feel that this is the best album in their discography or they really can't get into it. And I really don't know why, because this is a great release. This is a fantastic record, and it's definitely showcasing that the band did not have a sophomore slump. In fact, they were just looking to move into a better direction and just really accelerate their pace towards the top. Ride the Lightning had a couple of great songs on it that you can still hear to this day on the radio every so often, such as Creeping Death, the self-titled track Ride the Lightning, and of course the Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu is the instrumental on the record, and unlike Anesthesia Pulling Teeth, this is a full band instrumental. It's done by the whole entire group, and it's very well done, very well constructed. Kind of reminds me a lot of like a Ride of the Valkyries or something like that, where it really is just building and building and building a journey, and then it hits a climax right near the middle of the song and just thrusts forth. It's a very interesting little idea, and it's something that works very, very well in this particular release. It's one of the reasons why I like it so much. Now, this is also their first collaboration with producers Flemming Rasmussen, and let me tell you something. I really wish that Metallica would have stuck with these guys. Because, of course, after Flemming Rasmussen, we, of course, had to enter into the era of Bob Rock. And we know where that fucking took everything. Took it right down the shithole. Flemming Rasmussen seemed to really have a nice, tight grip on what Metallica wanted to do. Kind of understood where they were coming from, and was willing to sort of sit down there with them and let their exploratory process become something that's more realized than it was just fantasized. And Ride the Lightning definitely showcased this to a very grand degree. It's an album where James's vocals definitely are harsh, and they seem a little bit, well, frayed, decayed a little bit. It's definitely an early record where you can tell he's not has that traditional post-Black album sound to his voice, but this rough and rugged, gruff style of singing actually suits him very well, and suits the music that accompanies it. This is a very discordant album at times as well, and songs like Trapped Under Ice and Escape don't really fit the Metallica catalog all that well. In fact, Escape reminds me a little bit more of what was going on in the glam metal scene, so hey, you got a little bit of variety there. A couple years later, Master of Puppets was released. Master of Puppets is considered to be Metallica's magnum opus. And this is, of course, by most of the classic fans, the fans that really love the stuff in the 1980s, the stuff that Coverkiller's talking about right now. Not the people that will claim that the Black Album's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Not the people that will claim that all the sales figures, numbers, and all the like for the Black Album. But no, these are the fans that really believe that Master of Puppets was the epoch of their musical dynasty. The place where they were really able to make the most spellbinding music. And it's very easy to see why people would say this. The songs that you hear on this record are just incredible. From the opening riff of Battery all the way to the very last notes of Damage Incorporated, which seems cut off before it's even complete. This is an album that shines from front to back. It contains some really strong work. Master of Puppets, once again, is another strong self-titled track. But you also have a lot of other good songs in there as well, such as Disposable Heroes. Sanitarium is another one. Welcome Home is another song that really comes to mind. The Thing That Should Not Be is very strong. Oh man, but the place where it really culminates for me is probably in their best instrumental, in my opinion, out of all of them. And that is the song Orion. Orion to me almost seems like a fitting swan song for Cliff Burton. And I know that this really doesn't happen. Instead, the fitting swan song occurs on the next album, And Justice for All, with the song To Live Is To Die. However, Orion for me is really what spells Cliff Burton out to a T. This is something he may not have had very much influence upon, however, for that which he did, it definitely has a lot of power. This is where I really consider Metallica to have been at their best and brightest position. Considering, kind of like Call of Cthulhu, this is a song that really showcases a little bit of a building of an atmosphere, only to have it explode forth. Only this time it's done a little bit differently. instead of it being building, 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 explosion, 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 die down, kind of in a traditional setting, what it does here is that it builds up a little bit, then it dies down, and then it spends the next 2 or 3 minutes really recalculating itself back up, and then bam, the explosion that happens right around the 6 or 7 minute mark, right near the end of the song. Fantastic song, amazing, amazing way of setting an atmosphere. Hands down will always be my favorite instrumental by them. It will top Call of Cthulhu by mere points. We're talking like 0.05 or something like that, but it will always win. It will always win in my opinion. It's a fantastic song, really showcases mood, really showcases atmosphere. Everything that I love and embrace, Metallica was able to do with this song. Master of Puppets is an incredible release. They were at the highest of their highs, and then of course the accident occurred. The tragic bus accident that claimed the life of Cliff Burton. And this is where things sort of got a little bit negative for Metallica, because now they had to search for a bassist. And in doing so, they have actually found a bassist that was already in another band, Flotsam and Jetsam bassist and songwriter Jason Newsted. And they were able to claim him after his input was received on Doomsday for the Deceiver, Flotsam and Jetsam's debut album. And he was able to come and join Metallica for their 4th release and their final release of the 1980s, which was entitled And Justice for All. Now, And Justice for All has a lot of things that are different about it. It's still a very, very strong and positive release. However, there are a couple gripe points that I have about it. A couple of these songs are just way too long. And I'm not saying that these are bad songs, and I'm not saying that it's long in the way like Saint Anger or Death Magnetic, where it's necessarily boring. However, I think they just tried to do a little bit too much at some points. This was the album where it seemed like Metallica really was just saying, well, each and every one of these songs can be like 7 to 9 minutes. We could definitely pull that off. We can do it. There's like only 1 or 2 that isn't, and I believe one of them was Harvester of Sorrow, and that's barely clocking in at under 6, and, well, I'm not going to spit from the hip on claiming to know everything. However, another thing that really kind of bugs me a lot about this particular release, and really grinds my fucking gears, is that they went out and they got Jason Newsted, who's a fantastic bassist. You have to listen to Doomsday for the Deceiver to really show the potential that he really had, and you know, for the life of me, it always seems like you can never hear him on the original mix of And Justice for All. If I remember correctly, they actually had to re-release And Justice for All a couple of years later in order for his bass mix to even be audible to a listener. It was really turned down low, almost like they were afraid to let him shine forth. You know, almost out of fear that he would overshadow Cliff. I don't know, maybe I'm just crazy on that one. You can call me fucked up for that. I don't really care, because that's just kind of what I noticed. It's something where it's in the background, you can kind of hear the thump, but it's really, really low, and it's kind of inaudible behind the drums and the rhythm guitar that James is able to use. To Live Is to Die is another one of these instrumentals that Metallica was able to use, and this was considered to be the very last writing of Cliff Burton. There's a 4-line little poem that is spoken by James on the latter part of this particular song. It's very heartfelt. And it kind of paints this picture that Cliff almost saw his death as something that was going to happen, either that or was kind of in a position where he wanted to go. I don't know, it's one of those things where you can read into it way too much. However, as far as their instrumentals go, this one's kind of weak. I don't know what it is about it. This is just one that I can't get into nearly as much, which is just kind of sad, because it's not a bad instrumental, not to mention it has a lot of sentimental feeling behind it. Cliff Burton's a fantastic individual, and if these are his last writings, it definitely got a fitting memorial. It's definitely a fitting epitaph for him. However, it just really doesn't... I guess after going up against songs such as Orion and Call of Cthulhu, instrumentals, should I say, such as those two, it's just very, very difficult to even own up to that or even compare. So, overall, I mean, it's a good album, but those little complaining factors, it really bothers me somewhat. Now, of course, this is the album where you can see them break through a little bit more into the commercial market. Songs such as One and Blackening definitely really did that for them. And One, of course, is considered to be the band's first real ballad. And we would see them do a couple more ballads, but not until the 1990s. Well, the 1980s were definitely a huge time for Metallica. They, of course, adopted a nickname of Alcoholica, lost one of their key members in a tragic bus accident, had a run-in with Dave Mustaine, who, well, went on to form another part of the Bay Area Bashers, and they released 4 great albums. So, why is it that we've gone from 4 great albums that I seem to have praised in this video to the Death Magnetics and the Saint Angers of the 2000s that I have essentially told to go fuck themselves? Well, I guess there's only one way to find out. Stay tuned, because coming soon, Coverkiller is going to examine the 1990s era Metallica albums, where Metallica took a radical shift in production, but definitely also took a radical shift upward in sales.